Hello and welcome to this Against the Storm tutorial on recipes and crafting. As I mentioned in the introductory tutorial, this series will be covering all aspects of the gameplay, all of the various features and mechanics of the game. However, with the game still being in early access, some of these aspects may be altered slightly or greatly throughout the development period. When that happens, I plan to provide some kind of update, either with an updated tutorial video or at a minimum as a pinned comment. With that said, let's get started. Recipes occur in 4 different kinds of buildings. The first type of building is your gathering buildings. Buildings like the Stonecutter's Camp, the Scavenger's Camp, and the Woodcutter's Camp, although the Woodcutter's Camp only has one recipe. Using the Stonecutter's Camp as an example, these camps have 2 or 3 recipes available. The recipes are shown across this area here, and the controls are simple. Check or uncheck to tell the camp to gather or not gather that particular item. This is especially useful when a specific item can be gathered in more than one camp, and especially when that particular camp has a bonus available to gather in it. An example would be the Trapper's Camp and eggs. In the Trapper's Camp, the eggs with lizards can be gathered with the productivity bonus, where you have a 10% chance to produce twice as much. Whereas the eggs can also be gathered in the Scavenger's Camp, but there is no bonus available here. So to enable or disable a recipe, simply check or uncheck the box, and the workers in the camp will automatically gather or stop gathering that type of item, presuming that it's in range of the building. You can also adjust the priority of a specific recipe in a camp by toggling the up or down arrows on the priority selectors here, and if the priority will override the order of the recipes in the building. If the priorities are all the same, the recipes will be shown in their default order. These priority settings apply to all priorities in recipes in all types of buildings. The second type of building that contains recipes is a farm. Farms are similar to gathering camps, except that they do not have a priority system. Instead, you can just simply toggle a recipe on or off, and that farm will plant that particular recipe, that particular crop, in an adjacent field. Note that even if you uncheck this, the farms will still gather any materials in their adjacent fields, regardless of what the recipe selection is. The third type of building is the most common, and that is your standard production buildings. Buildings like the butcher, the granary, the supplier, and many, many, many more. As you can see, these have panels for each recipe as well, and priority selectors for each recipe. And again, toggling a priority on a lower item in the list to a higher priority will resort that item to the top of the list. Unlike gathering camps, production recipes have ingredients and output items shown. For example, with planks take one type of ingredient, wood, and they produce planks. Wood is shown here with a square icon. That means that there's only one ingredient that can be used in this recipe, wood. Compare that to flour, where you have 3 ingredients that can be used to make flour. You can toggle these ingredients on and off by clicking and clicking them again to turn them on and off. On is lit up, off is darker. And notice there were green dots next to the circle when more than one item is selected. That's to indicate to you that you have multiple input items selected for this recipe, so that you can know to click on it to see which items are selected. One of the nice things, not only can you change the priority of the recipe itself, but you can change the priority of the input ingredient. So let's say we were gathering grain at this time from the small farm or found wild on the ground in certain biomes. We could say that we want to use grain first. A higher priority number, using shift-click, will indicate that that item should be used first whenever making flour. And then the recipe will fall back on roots and mushrooms evenly, presuming they're both available. Or you could increase the grain's priority and then increase the mushroom's priority in order to say grain first, then mushrooms, then roots. Here you're also able to set a specific limit for this recipe as to how much of this item you would like this building to produce. This limit is honored somewhat softly, in that if you have multiple workers in a building, sometimes both of them will start making the same thing, thereby producing more of an item than you have in this limit. However, they won't get carried away and produce much more than that. So they do honor this limit fairly well. Other types of production buildings, or rather, this production building shows also the amount of time and the star level of this recipe. Other types of production buildings may also have a similar recipe to a building, and you can see the difference in the recipes by clicking on those buildings, such as the planks. 25 seconds for a 2-star recipe uses 5 wood to make 2 planks. Here at the crude workstation, which you start every game with, planks are made in 34 seconds with a default recipe, a 0-star recipe as I refer to it, and you use 8 wood to make 2 planks. Now note also that I do have a limit set here of 10, and note the green unlock icon, versus this one which has a limit of 30 and the orange or red lock icon. This means that this recipe is locked to the global standard, whereas this recipe has been overridden to use a local standard, a local limit. Now, global limits we are going to discuss in the recipe panel tutorial following this one, but you can access that quickly for this particular item by clicking on the icon. That'll open up the recipe panel and show you that particular recipe, that particular item, and where you can find recipes for that item, and you can configure properties for all of those particular buildings here for that recipe and all recipes. But we're going to save this detail on this for the next tutorial. Finally, I want to show the storage in the building, because this has a lot to do with recipes as well. Here you can see this building is storing stone and clay in anticipation of making bricks. I have both selected here, so they're storing both, but they are prioritized in making bricks from stone whenever possible. As they produce goods, those goods will be stored in this produced goods storage here. Items in this storage are not available to any other buildings in the game. These items must be hauled to a centralized storage, either the main storage or a satellite storage built elsewhere in the map, before any other production buildings can use this item. And from what I've witnessed, I believe they also have to deliver these items to storage and then pick them up and return them in order to use them in other recipes in this particular building. An example for that would be jerky that's used in making skewers. From what I've observed, this could not be correct, but from what I've observed, they have to actually deliver that jerky to storage and then go and get it again and bring it back in order to use that to make skewers. The logistics is always performed by the workers in the building, both to go and retrieve the items that they need for the ingredients and also to deliver the produced items. Finally, you'll notice your workers have a little icon here. This is producing. There's also an idle icon. There's a walking icon. There is a resting icon. That tells you what your worker is doing at the moment, and including a progress bar of this green circle. Your workers will return to a hearth to rest every so often, and during that time, they are not producing an item, they are not gathering or delivering materials for that production. They are on their idle time, going to eat or rest. So keep that in mind as well, that your workers will never be 100% productive. I think that concludes this tutorial. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me in the comments section below or in Discord. You can find the link to that in the description below. Also, let me know if you'd like any other detail on this tutorial or other tutorials available, other tutorial suggestions you may have about the game. I do have a whole list of tutorials that I'm planning on producing over the next days and weeks. Also, make sure you check out the rest of the tutorials in the list, as well as my Let's Play series, where I am considering that to be a tutorial in a Let's Play, and I'm going over a lot of the same information, but in a more practical hands-on setting, whereas this is more of a targeted specific setting focused towards a specific task, a specific aspect, a specific function of the game. Thank you all for joining me, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.